Hello. I wanted to start this off by saying that I love cinemas. I love movies, as you can probably no doubt tell, and I think that cinemas are the best places to watch movies. I think that the way they're designed with the darkened lighting really helps you focus on what you're supposed to be watching, but they're also great communal environments, getting to share with an audience a movie at the same time and getting to laugh and cheer with it. I think that it's really fantastic, and it's one of the communal spaces I think that I am most personally comfortable being in. I would almost argue that cinemas are my second home, and watching movies from the comfort of my own home doesn't really compare in a lot of ways because you don't have that same kind of atmosphere. You can get very easily distracted, and I know from first-hand experience, watching new releases on my laptop like I have been doing really is inferior to the cinematic experience, traditionally speaking. But these are not normal times. Now, as you're no doubt aware, we are going through the COVID-19 pandemic. Suddenly, spaces like cinemas have become places that we can no longer go to. However, in the UK, they have been starting to reopen again, as they have been in European countries like France and Germany. In the UK, cinemas have been allowed to open since July 4th, but it's been very sporadic. Some chains like Odeon and Showcase have opened some of their sites largely as a trial run while keeping the majority closed, while some other chains like Cineworld and View didn't open any of their sites, and that's largely because there's been a lack of new product. Most cinemas have been reopening either with the films they were showing just before they closed, movies like Sonic or Emma or Onward, or they've been showing classics like Back to the Future or The Shawshank Redemption, and that's largely to give them something to fill the screens with, although it is notable to say that there is some new releases out there, largely from UK indie distributors, most notably Blackwater Abyss, which is officially the first film to be released in UK cinemas since COVID-19. I've been watching this very tentatively but with bated breath. There is definitely an itch in me that I want to scratch, that I want to go back to cinemas, but I want to know that it was safe, that they were observing the proper protocols. To the credit of Odeon and Showcase in those sites, it does appear that that has been taking place. They incorporated things like hand sanitizer stations and clustered seating so that the rows behind customers would be blocked off. They were booking people in every other row, and also you couldn't sit next to people. They would be blocking off 2 seats next to you and things like that. That is perfectly understandable, and I think they've been doing well in those sites, although of course business has been extremely slow because there's been very little to attract people back, and the box office takings have meant that they've really struggled in previous weeks. Most cinemas were waiting for July 31st because then they'd have enough time to reopen before movies like Mulan and Tenet in the constant tennis game where they keep getting pushed back due to the crisis in the US. One of the chains that has been waiting for that 31st of July date is Cineworld, the second largest chain in the UK. They are a huge company. They own Regal in the US, and because of this, many film distributors have actually scheduled a whole raft of movies to arrive on that date, including the Russell Crowe thriller Unhinged, which is arguably one of the biggest titles. Now, these are all films that I could potentially review on my show Projector, which specialises in films that have opened in the UK before they do in the US. However, I will not be attending these movies, and I will tell you why. It's because I feel that, in particular, Cineworld have failed their customers. Now, I booked to go and see Unhinged on July 31st, today, as I'm recording this. I was going to attend a screening at 7 p.m. However, a couple of days beforehand, I noticed that the time had been greyed out on their website, and that indicates that a showing has sold out. Now, a screening selling out in these times is quite alarming, and I couldn't check the seating map because you can't do that once they grey out an option. Luckily, I had another cinema owned by them in my same town, so I looked at the screenings in that cinema, and frankly I was shocked at what I found. And it's very evident looking at the seating plan that social distancing is not taking place. You'd almost be forgiven for thinking that a pandemic wasn't going on right now looking at them. So I immediately cancelled my ticket because that's not an environment I want to find myself in. Cineworld claims on their website that they are following all the protocols to be COVID-19 safe. This includes things like perspex screens for staff, separated seating, PPE for staff, and frequent cleaning of high-touch areas. All things that you would expect. But my confidence in them is very much shaken by the fact that even on the most basic level on their website, their e-ticketing system, it's clearly failing at trying to get that across. Because while the system has apparently been tweaked to prevent you from booking a seat directly next to someone because on the next screen it will cancel that out, what it does not appear to be doing is stopping customers from sitting directly behind one another or directly in front of them. This arguably is even worse than allowing people to sit right next to each other, and this alarms me. I'm not angry. I'm genuinely concerned. I worry for the people that go to these cinemas, both customers and staff. I especially feel for the latter because they have no choice in the matter. If the cinemas are going to reopen, they have to go to work, unfortunately. And this puts them in a potentially dangerous environment. And it really isn't helped by the fact that on Twitter, there is a group called the Cineworld Action Group, which is a group of employees who are trying to get them to improve their working standards and have been voicing their concerns to their employer for quite some time, especially given this environment. But it appears that those have been totally neglected, especially when the Cineworld Action Group claimed that the only training that they're going to be having for reopening is 1 hour before the cinemas open their doors. Cineworld was also very reluctant to make mask wearing mandatory at all times. It was more something that was encouraged than strictly enforced. And on one hand, you can sort of understand this because there's a lot of people that aren't going to sit through a film for 2 hours wearing a face mask for its duration, even if that's exactly what they should be doing right now. That will be a deal breaker for many audiences. Also, cinemas can't sell concessions that you can eat and drink during the film, which is where they make most of their profit from. However, if you're concerned with making money, you shouldn't be reopening during a pandemic because you're doing so for all the wrong reasons. Luckily, the government has stepped in here in the UK. On July 31st, the day that I record this, the government has announced that they are tightening up the restrictions on face masks, so they now apply to places like cinemas or museums in the same way that they are legally enforced to be worn in shops. I think that this is exactly what they should have done and should have been applied at the same time as it was applied in shops. But the fact that it's here now is still praiseworthy. At least that addresses this very obvious loophole. That still, however, means that there's a lot of problems that have yet to be addressed. Now, I can only tell you my experience. I know that some people have already been back to cinemas and they've had a perfectly fun time and they felt safe for the duration of their visit. I wish that's what I could tell you right now, but it isn't. I didn't feel safe or comfortable going to that environment, so I made the choice not to. And I think I will continue to not return to my local cinemas unless I know that substantial changes have been made to address this. I think that Cineworld need to get their act together in particular. This is really not the time to be complacent like they have now. And I think that really we need to assess our priorities somewhat. I don't want to shame people who want to go to cinemas. I perfectly understand the impulse. I, more than anything, would want to be there right now. It's practically my second home. But I cannot, in good conscience, advise people to go out there and see movies in an environment that could be potentially harmful to them. And by reviewing movies that are showing in cinemas and only in cinemas, it means that I'm encouraging people to go back and put their bodies on the line, essentially. What we need to understand is that things like holidays and cinema trips are luxuries. They're not necessities. They're privileges afforded to us by social stability. But we don't have that right now. We are living through incredibly uncertain times where things can change at a moment's notice. COVID-19 is unprecedented and it's scary. I can understand why people want to retreat into escapism more than ever, but it simply isn't the time for it. It's too important. And speaking as someone who loves movies and loves cinemas, there's still no film that's worth your life. And this is especially true in the US, where apparently they're planning on reopening cinemas in time for Tenet in September. That feels like a ludicrous idea given the situation right now, if not outright deluded. There is no way that things are going to suddenly stabilise in the next few weeks. It's simply not going to happen. We need to confront the reality of it. I think that what I'm going to be doing from this point forward is that I'm still going to be covering movies on projector, but purely on VOD, where people can watch them from the safety of their homes. I think there will come a day where cinemas can reopen and audiences can get together and share in that experience once again, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be fantastic. But that is a long way off. Until then, stay safe, take care of each other, and wear a mask. Stay safe, everyone.